this computer. There we go. Okay, so here we are, another night. Uh, Grateful that those of you who have made it tonight have come to check this session out. Going to be talking about label reading and other topics that might be of interest to you, perhaps. And we have a Eugene Springfield famous guest speaker, Sean, with us tonight, who's going to kind of lead the session. And Scott, of course, is here, and I'm kind of listening in. And I imagine Kristen will like to put her words in at some point in time. And we hope many of you have some questions tonight that you get answered that's been kind of burning on your brain. I do want to go over one detail, and that's we've had a couple complaints from people who view the videos, the recordings, and what happens is it's hard to control when people don't turn off their microphone when they're done speaking. It leaves a kind of a background noise, which is kind of annoying when people are trying to review these. And we've had a lot of people who view the recordings. They can't make it to a regular session. So could you raise your hand if you don't know how to turn your microphone off? And if you do know how to turn your mic, if you don't, send me a note, turn your microphone on and speak up, and just try to remember to turn it off intermittently. We'll repeat this a couple more times as the weeks go by, just so we can, and I know sometimes people just forget, you get distracted, but try to do your best if you're not going to be speaking to kind of mute yourself. And then we'll give you time to figure out how to turn your microphone back on. Any questions about that issue? Okay, good. I hope not. And if you do, let us know. Scott, do you have anything that you want to share with the group before we get started and Sean kind of does his thing and whatever?
Yeah, just a reminder for the Eugene Health and Wellness Expo this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. On Saturday, it's from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and on Sunday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Lane County Fairgrounds in the Expo Hall, rooms 1, 2, and 3. This is our second year with Eugene Plant-Based Providers. We have a booth there, so we'd love for you guys to come. And Charlie and I will be speaking there at 2 o'clock both days. We have a little stage there. People do presentations, and so our Eugene Plant-Based Provider group, who we do all these free community events for, so come check that out, and hope to see you there.
And I don't want to skip over Lisa Chick, our third-year med student. Lisa, glad to see you were able to make it, but I just want to allow you an opportunity to share what you want to share so you can get back studying or whatever you need to do. Carry on. Here's your mic.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm driving home from school right now, but we have the new book club book. It's going to be the Blue Zones book. So we'll have our first meeting for that at the end of October in just a couple weeks. And as always, I'm available for free one-on-one health coaching. And you can find all the information for both of those things in the weekly newsletter from Scott. And that's all I have.
Okay, well, safe driving home, Lisa, and thank you for everything you're doing. And so we have Eugene Plant-Based Providers, a group of doctors, physician assistants, nurses, registered dietitian. But there are some people who have been truly active and really a force in moving along and promoting activities of whole food, plant-based. And among those activities, I was able to attend one. It was a shopping tour. Sean um, has been is our registered dietitian, and maybe you could share with us a little bit about how you got started in all this, just because it's interesting to most of us. And then you were going to talk about label, um, I don't know, nutrition and reading labels and whatever else is on your mind. It's your session. Have fun, and I'm sure we're all going to enjoy it. Enjoy this.
Thanks, Charlie. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Perfect. Well, like Charlie mentioned, my name's Sean Egglestone. I'm a registered dietitian here in Eugene, Springfield. I work at Mackenzie Willamette Medical Center. I've been there for around 8 years, and I've seen around 25,000 patients I've estimated in that time. So I, bring to the table a lot of knowledge and experience working with so many people in so many different ways. My path is kind of interesting, I'd like to think. I started off in neuroscience and worked in research and chemistry and pharmaceuticals for a little bit. And then, like most of the plant-based providers, started reading about nutrition and disease prevention and thought, how come I didn't learn about any of this in all of my pre-med programs? And so I decided to go back to school to be a dietitian, and the rest is history. If you guys have any questions, you feel free to interrupt at any time, okay? I'm going to try and share my screen here. Let me know if you can see it.
Yeah, I'll let you know when it comes up. There you go. It works.
Yay. Let's see if this gets, can we make this big? How about that? Is that good?
It's perfect.
Awesome. Cool. Well, like Charlie said, this is going to be mostly on label reading and shopping, and I'm going to throw in a few extra things as well. I also have some other sites I want to introduce to everyone as additional resources so they can explore in their free time some extra information. So first, before we get started talking about label reading and all the fun and math that's involved in that, I do want to talk a little bit about nutrition in general. So a big part of my job is nutrition education and education in general. And that's oftentimes what we see here with Scott and Charlie's class is talking about what to eat, how to live and how to eat. But oftentimes one of the things I think, one of the areas most people fail in is why that's actually important. So we can do all of the education and classes and seminars that we want, but usually when we fail at following a healthy diet, it's not because we don't have the right information, it's because we don't have a good enough reason why. And so I'm lucky enough as a dietitian to see people in their most vulnerable states every day. And for me, that's often a reminder of why it's so important to eat healthy, because a lot of the suffering that people go through in the world, at least in the US, is from chronic disease. And so if we can at least decrease or prevent occurrences of chronic disease, we can help limit some of the suffering that we go through. So for me, that's a constant reminder of why it's so important to follow a healthy diet. For other people, it might be they want to watch their kids grow up, or they want to be there for their grandkids, or their caretaker for their spouse. So whatever it may be, it is important to think about why it's important to be healthy and not just how to implement it. Food is more than just calories and energy. A lot of people think about eating food the same way that we would put gas in our car. Food isn't just energy to help us get through the day. As I'm sure Scott and Charlie have taught many times over, the plant-based foods have a lot of antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, and other compounds that help reduce our risk for certain forms of cancer and help boost our immune system and decrease DNA damage. And so I want to think of food as the building blocks. What we ate yesterday and last week and last year, our body uses those as building blocks for our skin, our hair, our nails, our eye cells. So it's not just fuel and energy, but it's actually the raw materials in which we build our body. And when we think about food like that, I think it makes it a little bit more important in what we eat. Oftentimes when people think about following a diet, right, because that's sort of why we talk about label reading, is because we want to eat healthier. Oftentimes people use weight loss as a primary goal. And I want to encourage each and every one of you to actually not use weight loss as a primary goal or primary focus. Weight loss is a symptom or a result of following a healthy diet, but shouldn't be the reason why you follow it. And I also think some better goals to have are like improvement in your lipid panel, whether it's a decrease in your total cholesterol, improvements in your hemoglobin A1C, which is a 3-month average of your blood sugars. So if you're diabetic, or if you're at risk for diabetes, or pretty much most people should have an idea of what their hemoglobin A1C is. So if you've never heard of that, I definitely recommend doing a little bit more research on that. And I'll show you some links. But your hemoglobin A1C is a 3-month average of your blood sugars, and it's what we use to diagnose diabetes. Less constipation, more energy. So using these as, I think, better goals than just weight loss alone. And then last but not least, if we focus on health, so later in this presentation, I'll talk a little bit more about servings and certain types of food and what like an optimal diet would look like. And so focusing on like grams of fiber or servings of fruits and vegetables, or searching for whole grain products on a nutrient label is going to be more valuable in terms of getting you close to your goal than just stepping on the scale. I do want to reiterate this. This is something that I know Scott and Charlie have talked about before. This is from Forks Over Knives. This is about calorie density. So we know that fruits and vegetables are around 100 to 300 calories per pound. So they fill you up without giving you so many calories because they're higher in water and fiber. And remember, plant foods, unlike animal foods, have a lot more water, and plant foods, fiber only comes from plants. And that helps fill you up on bulk without filling you up on calories. And then, of course, as we move from right to left on the screen, we're increasing the overall fat that we're taking in, we're decreasing the amount of fiber that we take in. And so it's easy to see why diets high in animal products and refined foods can contribute to weight gain, because it's easier to overeat on these foods. I have another presentation on this specifically, which I'll show a link to that later. This is just another way of looking at the same thing. So we're going to think about this later in the presentation, but this is just a numerical representation. So your fruits and vegetables being the lowest in calories. I know there's a lot of questions around, if I'm diabetic, should I eat fruit, or is fruit high in sugar? So should I worry about that if I'm trying to lose weight? What we see is that your fruits, your vegetables, your grains, and your beans are the lowest in calories compared to other foods like animal products. So meat in general is 1,000 calories a pound, processed and junk food around 2,500 calories a pound. And then your oils and your fats are going to be the highest in concentration because it's just fat. There's no protein, there's no fiber, there's no water. So as I mentioned earlier, in terms of goal setting, in terms of what should we actually look at to determine if our diet is healthy? Oftentimes, patients will come to me with what we call diet recalls. So it could be a 3 to 7 day list of the food that they eat. And if you want to know how I look at food or how I examine the healthfulness of a diet, it really comes down to this list. And this list is a modified version of Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen. So Dr. Greger, he came out with a list called the Daily Dozen. This is a slightly modified version that I came out with, but either one will do. So on here, we're going to see 1 serving of beans or lentils daily, and a serving is considered 3/4 of a cup. And then here on the examples, I have a list of what that would actually look like. And if anyone wants a copy of this handout, let me or Scott or Charlie know, or you can send an email on the Eugene Plant-Based Providers website. I can see about posting this on the site. I should be able to do that without a problem. But if you are interested in this handout, just let me know. I can make this available for everybody. And then your fruits. So we should be having at least 3 fruits per day. So it could be 1 piece of fruit or whatever fits in the palm of your hand. So if we eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, it would be 1 fruit at breakfast, 1 fruit at lunch, 1 fruit at dinner. And then our vegetables. We know that your vegetables are the lowest in calories per pound. So vegetables are not only high in nutrients, but they also help promote weight loss as well. So half of my plate at lunch and half of my plate at dinner are vegetables. That gives me around 4 servings per day. And on the right-hand side, of course, it goes over some of the servings. I'm not going to go over this in super detail just because we do have a lot to cover tonight. But generally speaking, your produce or your fruits and vegetables should make up something around 40 to 50% of your food that you consume in an entire day. So unlike when we go out to eat, they give you a side of vegetables. I want us to think about produce as being a large amount of food that we consume during the day. And then whole grains here, 3 servings per day. So it could be a half a cup of oatmeal or a cup of whole grain cereal, or 1 tortilla, like a whole wheat tortilla, or 1 slice of bread. And then I have some bonus foods at the bottom. So some nuts and seeds, 1 handful, some flax seeds. So if you have heart disease, or even if you're at risk for heart disease, which is pretty much everybody, flaxseed is going to be really important because it's very high in omega-3 fatty acids, which are anti-inflammatory. So one of the risk factors that we look at for heart disease risk is our intake of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids. So our pro-inflammatory versus our anti-inflammatory fats. And flaxseed are really high in the anti-inflammatory fats. So they're on here at the bottom, as well as spices like turmeric. So generally speaking, when people go over what they eat for the day, maybe it's a yogurt and a banana at breakfast, a sandwich at lunch, and a meat and a vegetable at dinner. Let's say that's what they tell me they eat. So they get credit for a fruit at breakfast. Maybe they had a little bit of a vegetable on a sandwich or not, but the white bread and the deli meat don't count. And then their dinner, their meat's not going to count, but their vegetable will. So you can see how even though they ate 3 meals that day, they really only got 2 things done on this list, a fruit and a vegetable. Another thing that I see that's pretty common is people don't eat breakfast. And then they have maybe a small lunch, and then they'll eat dinner. And the problem with that is, let's say they skip breakfast, they have a fruit or some crackers for lunch, and then they have a dinner. So now they need to get beans, 3 fruits, 4 servings of vegetables, and 3 servings of whole grains, all at dinner. And you can see how difficult it can be to get these foods in if we're not eating enough food. Is there any questions on that? I go over it pretty briefly, but all this is going to line up when we actually take a trip down the aisles in the grocery store.
I have a question.
Go
Sure.
ahead, Jeannie.
Yeah, looking at the serving sizes, boy, when I eat broccoli, I fill half my plate with my cooked broccoli.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It seems like, I mean, I'm not gaining weight. I'm at a good weight. I don't want to lose any more. It just seems like my servings are so much bigger. My husband, I'll look at, he's not whole food plant-based, but I'll look at what he eats, and it's just a little tiny plate, and here I have a huge plate.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going on with that? Is this to lose weight following these serving sizes?
No, not at all. And one of the things that you'll notice with whole food plant-based diets, or certainly people that promote them, is 2 things that we often don't talk about are portion controlling and calorie restricting or calorie counting. Those are 2 things that are often not as emphasized in plant-based foods, because plant-based foods tend to be lower in calories than animal and processed foods. And so people naturally lose weight when they eat more plants and less animals. If your servings are bigger than what's on here, that's totally fine. As you mentioned, half of your plate is broccoli, so that counts for half of your vegetable or half of your plate being vegetables. The only time that would ever be an issue is if you were underweight or losing weight to the point where it was either too rapid or to the point where you were losing too much weight, and you were becoming underweight, then you could switch out the vegetables for a higher calorie food. But generally speaking, there isn't necessarily an issue with eating too many vegetables. The other nice thing that you'll notice here on the chart is under vegetables, it says 1 cruciferous vegetable. So your cruciferous vegetables include your broccoli, your cauliflower, kale, collard greens, that sort of stuff. And broccoli, being a cruciferous vegetable, reduces our risk for colon cancer. So it is recommended to consume cruciferous vegetables often. So it's actually a good thing that you're doing that.
Thank you.
No problem. I'm not going to go over this in detail because I do want to get to the fun stuff that you guys all came for. But there's, if you remember, over a decade ago, they used to use the food pyramid. And they decided at some point around 2010 that they weren't going to use the food pyramid anymore because people don't eat off of a pyramid, we eat off of a plate. And so the plate method was born. And some would argue that the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine were one of the first people to pioneer this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but and those are great guys over there. But this is sort of my version of the plate method. I'll show you another slide here. This is Harvard School of Public Health version of the plate method, but this is a visual representation of the chart that I just showed you with the beans, the whole grains, the fruits, and the vegetables. So if you look at your lunches and your dinners in terms of this plate, you'll be able to get those servings in per day. One of the things I do want to say before I forget, if you look at that list and you think, Sean, wow, that's a lot of food. That's way more than I eat. That's okay. And that's why it's important to work with a health professional, certainly one that specializes in nutrition, because we can take a look at your current intake and your calorie needs and modify it a little bit, because you don't necessarily have to eat everything on that plate or everything on that list, but it does give you an idea of if you are eating 3 meals a day and they tend to be good sized meals and you're not getting that list checked off, can you sub out some of those foods? But if you were to put that list in visual format, you're going to get what's called the plate method. So half or around half of your plate is a vegetable, which I mentioned, your lunch and your dinner, around half is a vegetable. And then some kind of fruit. So if you don't have a vegetable at breakfast, most of us don't, you'll have the fruit section will stay at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Then you'll have some kind of whole grain. So it could be whole wheat pasta, brown rice, corn tortillas, quinoa, barley, oatmeal, and then some kind of protein. So with us being plant-based advocates, your protein sources are going to be your tofu, your tempeh, your beans, your lentils. And so if you follow this plate at lunch and dinner, and then you just exclude the vegetable section at breakfast, then you can get most of those check boxes completed. So this is what most people's fridge looks like. Hopefully none of you recognize this. This is a lot of processed food. When we look in this fridge, we can see some eggs, we can see maybe some milk on the door, but there's not a lot of fresh things in here, and there's a lot of labels. And I think that's sort of where the science and the art of label reading began, was when labels became commonplace and complicated. But when we look, and here's another, like you open your pantry, you see all this stuff. So even though we don't recommend eating these kinds of food, label reading does become more important the more processed or complex your food gets. As you can see, there's going to be a lot of fake ingredients and things hidden in this food that's going to make label reading more critical. This is more about what would be the optimal goal. So here on the left-hand side, we have a pantry. This is going to be your dried goods. So we can see some whole grain pasta, some brown rice, our dried beans. If we do have some canned goods, hopefully they're no added salt tomatoes, and we'll talk about canned goods later. But we can recognize all of these foods. They're all individual ingredients. Same thing on the right. We open this fridge, we can see some carrots, some asparagus, some peanut butter, salad, some avocados. So you'll notice that these are all individual ingredients. And as a result, they don't have labels on them. So label reading becomes very simple when we buy foods that don't have labels on them. So ultimately, the label reading process should be pretty easy and straightforward if the majority of the food that you buy doesn't have labels on it at all. The other thing to keep in mind is, I think one of the stumbling blocks for people wanting to eat this way is they don't want to do the dishes. So that's a fun fact. I think that was in a survey that I read recently, is some people don't want to, they don't like grocery shopping or cooking their own meals because it's too time consuming to grocery shop and they don't want to do dishes. So for me, I don't meal plan. I don't come up with the recipes and the things I want to eat during the week and then write down a big list and then go to the store and buy that. That takes too much time. What I do is I go to the grocery store and I buy the healthiest foods that are available and I bring them home. And then I ask myself, what am I going to eat with the foods that I bought? What meals can I prepare with the foods that I brought? So just give that a think. The other thing I want to mention is I go to Costco and I like to people watch. I take a look at what's in their cart. I go to the grocery store. I'm always kind of trying to sneak a glance about what are other people buying, right? And the big difference, I shop at a lot of the same places that everyone shops at. I go to Costco, I go to grocery outlet. I go to Fred Meyer's. I go to Safeway. But what's the difference between my cart and everyone else's cart? My cart is filled with single ingredients, and everyone else's cart has more processed food with longer ingredient labels. If you do want to make a grocery list and you're like, Sean, I'm going to get completely lost in the grocery store, I need to sort of plan this out. The traditional way is to think about what kind of meals you want to make, and I'll have some examples at the end. And then you can figure out the kind of recipes that you're going to use, and then write down the ingredients that you need based on what you're missing from your current pantry and fridge. So give a good look over about what you have. One of the things I want you to keep in mind is think back on that plate method. So with the plate method, around 50% of the plate is produce, 25% is protein, and 25% is whole grains. So when you go through your pantries, your cupboards, your cabinets, and your fridge, I want the same distribution of food in your home. So 50% of the food in your house is produce, fruits and vegetables. So I've got a lot of frozen vegetables and a lot of fresh vegetables. 25% carbohydrates. So that's going to be your whole wheat pasta, your whole grain tortillas, your brown rice, your quinoa, your barley, your oatmeal. I have bulgur. I tried making a dish with tabbouleh. I made tabbouleh with bulgur the other day. And so around 25% of the food in my house is whole and intact grains. And then 25% roughly is going to be your protein. So your dried beans, your lentils, your tofu, that kind of stuff. So roughly speaking, what does it look like that I eat in a day? So for breakfast, I'm having oatmeal or some kind of high fiber hot cereal. Cream of wheat isn't as high in fiber as oatmeal. I could do a high fiber cereal. I could have some fruit. Remember, the 3 fruits per day, you don't have to do fruit at every meal. You can eat all 3 fruits at once. It doesn't really matter unless you're having a particular difficult time managing your blood sugars. You could eat 3 pieces of fruit all at once. It doesn't have to be spread out. I might have a green smoothie or whole wheat toast with peanut butter. For lunch, I typically make it really simple and have leftovers from the night before. I'm also lucky enough to work at a hospital and in a kitchen, so I get to go from the salad bar and pick out any vegetable I want. So that's really convenient. And then at dinner, I have some kind of, again, I get the healthiest foods in the store and I bring them home, and what do I prepare with them? So my wife and I, we always start dinner the same way. We get out the vegetables, we prep them up. So your onions, your mushrooms, your peppers, cabbage, your greens, whatever. And we cook the vegetable. And then we ask ourselves, well, what kind of protein are we going to have with the vegetable? So it could be quinoa, it could be pasta. And then we ask ourselves what kind of protein we're going to have. Sorry, there's a dog here. So if he's whining, I apologize. What kind of protein? So is it tofu or is it beans or lentils? I think we're dog sitting and I think his mommy's home. Uh-oh. So let's go shopping. So we have our list. Again, I don't always take a list because I'm just going to buy the healthiest foods and bring them home. Don't go down any aisle you don't have to. So when I was growing up, we used to go down every single aisle, up and down, just religiously. Don't go down the aisles if you don't have to, because you know you're going to end up picking out stuff you shouldn't. So soda aisle, not going down. Snack aisle, the bakery, forget it. Deli, we know that processed meat increases our risk for colon cancer, so we don't go into the deli. And we stay out of the frozen dinner section. You can go to the frozen produce section, but not the frozen dinner section. Our shopping cart, just like our kitchen, please excuse me real quick.
And just to let people know, some of the handouts, like the stomach filling one and the calorie density one, I have those on the class website. But yeah, we'll make sure Sean gets the ones on the other ones with the plate method and some of the other ones he had.
Nobody's there. All right, so sorry about that. We might have to go into a different room. His mommy's not home yet. Okay. So just like the plate method and our fridge, half the time in the grocery store is going to be in the produce section. A quarter of it's going to be getting carbohydrates. So whether it's from the bulk bin section or the, we're going to take this on the go. Or the bread or dill beans. We're not. Jesus.
It's okay, Sean.
He's attached to his mom at the hip, you know.
Yep.
Okay, so this we're gonna improvise here. All right, so half my time is going to be spent in the grocery store, is going to be in the produce section. So when I was growing up, we used to go and get bananas and oranges, and that's about it. So I'm trying out one new kind of plant food, one new kind of vegetable every time I go in, one new kind of fruit when I go in. So I'm not going to stick with the same comfortable items that I've always done. I'm going to have a little bit more variety. 25% of my time is going to be spent in the protein section. So most of it's going to be me figuring out where they hid the tofu, but it could be dried beans. We get some peanut butter from the little like bin where they grind it for you. And then your carbohydrates are going to be, maybe we get some bread or some tortillas or some whole wheat pasta. So it's following, you're going to notice that repeating pattern. What we eat, our food environment at home, and how we spend time in the grocery store are all going to resemble our diet. I'm going to skip over this. Most of us know what perimeter shopping is, and I'm going to take you guys on a quick grocery store here tour here in a second anyway. So here's the produce section. As I mentioned, this is where I'm spending half of my time at the grocery store. You can see how big of a variety there really is here. The more colors of foods that you eat, the better. So they always say eat the rainbow. So one of the coolest tips that I've learned is the darker the color, the better it is for you. So remember, these foods aren't just calories, just energy for our body. They have a lot of antioxidants. So plants, they spend their time outside, and so they get hit with sunlight all day long. And a way that plants combat the damage from the sun is they create antioxidants in the form of these bright colors. So think of these bright colors as the natural protective sunscreen, if you will, that these plants produce. And when we eat these foods, our immune system incorporates those chemicals, those protective compounds into our own immune system. So for example, red apples are better for us than green apples. Red grapes are better than green grapes. Red onions are better than white onions. Broccoli is better than cauliflower. So the darker the color, the more antioxidants, the better it is for you. We also notice that there's no ingredient labels here. So this makes label reading really easy when we buy foods that don't have any ingredients. Next, I'll go to the bin section. Again, around 25% of my time is going to be spent in sort of that carbohydrate, in sort of the carbohydrate section, if you will. So again, I'm looking at single ingredients. In my pantry right now, I should actually show you guys what's in my pantry. I have mason jars, and in each of those mason jars, I have quinoa, and I have the bulgur that I mentioned. I have nutritional yeast. I have brown rice. I have all these different kinds of grains, millet, sorghum, all of these things that a lot of us have maybe heard of, but we haven't tried before. These are going to be grains. Usually they're prepared by boiling. And you'll notice that, again, there's not really a lot of labels to read here because it's just single ingredients. But I do understand that it's not reasonable for all of our food to come from this section. So let's talk about label reading. How are we doing on time, guys?
Plenty of time.
Okay, cool. So let's get down into actual label reading. So hopefully that information that we've talked about so far has been helpful. I know some of it could be repetitive, but it's also important. I know for me, hearing things many times over is I find it very helpful to sort of ingrain that knowledge when I hear it over and over again, and sometimes in sort of different ways. So here we have a label. What kind of things are we going to look for? So first and foremost, we should look at the servings per container. A lot of us will look at these numbers and say, oh, sodium 160, that doesn't seem too high. But it could be like a can of Campbell's soup. What might be one serving for most of us is actually 2.5 servings. And so it's important to keep in mind how many servings we're actually getting, because that can make a big difference what these numbers eventually add up to. Now, as I mentioned before, most of the foods that we buy should have single ingredients. And so single ingredients, you actually don't have to read the calories, the fat, the sodium, the carbohydrates. So let's say this was quinoa or brown rice or whole wheat pasta. Maybe whole wheat pasta is not the best example, but let's just take quinoa or brown rice. Nature has already figured out the right amount of calories, carbs, fats, protein, and obviously there's no cholesterol in plant foods. So nature's already figured that out. So there's no point in reading the label when we know there's only one ingredient. It's only important when there's multiple ingredients that we read the label. So if you pick up a bag of dried beans, don't bother reading the label. I mean, you could look at the ingredients to make sure that it's just dried beans. But if it's just dried beans, don't stress about looking at the sugars or their fibers or the total calories. So one of the more complicated topics that I go over with people is calculating the calories from fat. This isn't something that you necessarily have to do, but if you're interested in fat, this is what I do. So the old nutrition labels had on them total calories from fat, but they got rid of that with the new label a couple of years ago. So here we have total fat is 8 grams. There's 9 calories per gram of fat. So we take our 8 times 9, and that'll give us our total fat calories. And then we can divide that by 230 total calories, and that will give us our percentage of calories from fat. So for example, here on the bottom, is my mouse doing anything? Right here, fat. Ideally, we're looking at 20% or less of calories coming from fat. So this product has 31% of its calories from fat. So 8 times 9 divided by 230. So if this had 20 grams of fat, it would be 20 times 9 divided by 230. And that will give you the percentage of calories from fat. And we'll talk about that on a next slide as well. If there's only one thing that you remember from this presentation, it's the sodium. So there's 2 different ways to look at the sodium. One way is the sodium should be less than the total calories. So that's an easy way if you hate math. So here, 160 milligrams of sodium, 230 calories. So this product is okay in terms of its salt. Now, why does this oversimplistic method work? Because let's say you get 2,000 calories per day. The current recommendation from the American Heart Association is under 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. So if you eat 2,000 calories per day, your salt's going to be under or at 2,000 milligrams. So you're still going to be under that amount. And of course, your fruits and your vegetables are sort of free foods. So your sodium intake for the day will be much less than that. So making sure the sodium is less than the calories is an oversimplistic, but not a terrible way to label read. I look for under 300 milligrams is good, and that's per serving. Under 200 milligrams is awesome, or I should say is great. And then under 100 milligrams is awesome. So under 300 is good, under 200 is great, under 100 is awesome. So here this sodium is 160, so that's good. This isn't something I always use, but for fiber, I'm looking for at least 4 grams of fiber. So if you're picking up a tortilla or you're picking up a slice of bread, I'm looking for around 4 or a box of cereal. I'm looking for at least 4 grams of fiber. This isn't always the case, but I did want to touch on it. Now, if you're really into the math and you want to learn more about total sugars and fiber to total carbohydrate ratios and more complicated, math type equations for when you're grocery shopping, I highly recommend you check out Jeff Novick. He's a dietitian and he has some videos on YouTube. This presentation I can provide to you guys if you want. This link down here will take you to Jeff Novick's video. Can y'all still see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Cool. So it'll take you to this guy right here. Jeff Novick, it's lifestyle is medicine. Hey, we've heard that before, right? Lecture, reading food labels with Jeff Novick. And this really dives into, he has these little graphs. So if you're really into label reading and you want to dive into the math, this is a fantastic presentation. I've watched it many times. I prefer to make it a little bit more simple, but it is a good presentation. And the take-home message for what he recommends is the fat should be 20% or less of the total calories. So we talked about how to calculate that. And I have another video on that. Again, I'll show you all the links to some of my other videos. Uh-oh, what happened here? Where did that red thing go? Anyway.
That was me. I was just playing with you.
You sneaky. Sugar. So this total sugar should be less than 10% of total calories. So you can take the sugar, 12 grams, times 4 calories per gram. So this product has 48 calories from sugar, divided by 230 calories will give you 21% of calories from sugar. That's too high. Jeff Novick recommends less than 10%. And then the sodium should be equal to or less than the calories. So this product here fails the fat and the sugar test, according to Jeff Novick.
Sorry, on that last slide, what was the fiber to carb trick? Since most of us are not getting nearly enough fiber in our diet?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for women, they should be getting somewhere between 25 and 28 grams of fiber per day. Men, it's closer to 35. I personally recommend at least 40 grams of fiber per day. We know that for every 10 additional grams of fiber, your risk for heart disease goes down by 9%. So the more fiber you eat, the better, as long as you're hydrating adequately to prevent constipation from eating too much fiber and in the presence of dehydration. But the carbohydrate to the fiber to carbohydrate trick is you want the total carbohydrates to be no more than 5 times the amount of fiber. So for this product, if we take 4 grams of fiber times 5, that gives us 20 grams. So the total carbohydrates should be no more than 20 grams. They recommend a 1 to 5 fiber to total carb ratio. So remember, fiber is a non-digestible carbohydrate. Sugar is a simple carbohydrate. And then we also have complex carbohydrates, which are not listed on here. So if you take your total carbs and you subtract your sugars and your fiber, you'll be left over with the amount of starch or complex carbohydrate in this product. But in any case, your grams of fiber times 5, that should give you a number such that the total carbohydrates is no more than that. However, with, I believe, oatmeal, but definitely brown rice, it does not pass that test. So even if we look at intact grains that are high in fiber, no added sugars, they don't pass that test. So that is not a very good test for that I personally use. I haven't found it successful. It can be a little bit better when we're looking at certain breakfast cereals, but I don't personally use that. I would say for me, I'm closer to like a 1 to 7 to 1 to 10. So if you can get like a 1 to 10 ratio of fiber to carbs, that's pretty good. Anything above a 1 to 10, we're getting into processed food. That can be helpful when we're looking at scientific research articles to determine the quality of someone's high carbohydrate diet. But I don't personally use that trick. So hopefully that answered your question.
The way I like to look at it, Sean, is only use the 5-to-1 rule if you're going to eat a processed food, and try to get as close to that as possible. But like you were saying earlier, with single ingredient foods that don't have labels, don't worry about the 5-to-1 ratio when you're eating a single ingredient, whole intact grain. Just use it for processed foods and try to get as close to the 5-to-1 as you want. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was helpful. Thank you, both of you.
Yeah. So personally, I care more about, again, the ingredients, and we'll talk about that in here in a minute. But I just want to give you one more example. So let me get rid of this. When we see percentages of fat listed on a label, that fat is going to be, the manufacturers put that there. It's going to be fat as a percentage of weight, not calories. So for example, here we have Piggly Wiggly ground beef. It's 90% lean. I'm thinking that's a pretty low fat product. 90% lean, that seems really good. The way that they do it is they look at the servings, 113 grams. They divide the fat in grams, 11, by the serving, 113, and they get 90% lean or 10% fat. But what we see here in this product is the calories are 200 and the fat calories are 100. So as a dietitian, I look at fat as a percentage of calories, not as a percentage of weight. So this product is 50% fat, not 90% lean. A 93% product will be around 20% fat. Another way to look at it, and Ken, I'll get to your question here in a second, is milk. So whole milk is 3.1% fat. And then obviously 2% milk is 2% fat. So some people think that whole milk is 100% fat, and then two milk is like 2% of the fat compared to whole milk. That's not the case. Whole milk is 3% fat by weight, 50% fat by calories. 2% milk is 2% fat by weight and 35% fat by calories. And then skim milk is 1% fat by weight and 20% fat by calories. Ken, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm a label reader. And can you go back to that slide before this one?
Sure, if I can figure out how. There you go.
I've always been curious about the relationship. We've got all these factors, and I certainly got them memorized. But we don't, I don't recall having any factor or ratio comparing sugar, which I assume is carbohydrate. So like breakfast cereals are a super example. So they'll have 37 grams of carbohydrates, and they may have a very little amount of sugar. So I'm trying to, is there a ratio between carbohydrates and sugars, or between carbohydrates and, sugars that we should be looking for?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if Scott can comment on that. So carbohydrates include complex carbohydrates and simple carbohydrates, such as sugar, and then non-digestible carbohydrates, which is fiber. So sugar is considered a type of carbohydrate. And as I show here at the bottom, and I'm sure you've noticed, we look at sugar as a percentage of calories rather than as a percentage of total carbohydrates. I don't typically buy food with a lot of like with sugar as an added ingredient anyway. And it also depends on like what the food is, because your fruit is going to have a lot of total sugars. The ratio of carbohydrates to total sugars is going to be a lot higher in our fruit products versus our products that have added sugar. And so I don't personally look at a kind of ratio between total sugars or added sugars and total carbohydrates. So I don't have a specific answer for you, but maybe Scott, is that something that that you can chime in on, or Charlie, or?
Yeah, I don't look at ratios when it comes to that. I would just say, looking for the, like you covered already, total sugars and grams, and then looking at that ingredients list. And if there's more than 5 or 6 ingredients and there's a bunch of, it looks like a chemistry set, then you don't want to be eating it because it's going to be highly processed. And then also in the handout I have on the class website under the handouts for classes, where I have the, how to read food labels without getting tricked. It has a list of all the kind of hidden names for sugar, because there's so many different names for sugar. And so I think, if you just stick with mostly not eating anything with the label for the most part, and then also if it has lots of ingredients you don't recognize, more than 5 or 6 ingredients, and looks like the chemistry set is probably not something you want to be eating, at least not on a regular basis.
And ideally the added sugar should be as low as possible. So that becomes more important when we're comparing multiple items. So if you have a few products at the store that you like that are similar, you can use the added sugars and compare them across products and pick the product out that way as well. Good question. There are different legal definitions to sodium. You might see low sodium, less sodium, reduced sodium, light. There are actual definitions that manufacturers have to follow when they post these labels on a product. However, not all foods that are low in sodium are advertised as being low sodium or no added salt. So generally, I don't look for this on a label because I flip the product around. And again, I'm looking for under 300 is good, under 200 is great, under 100 is awesome. So with the one sort of exception for me would be soy sauce. You're not going to find a low sodium soy sauce. I will warn you against Bragg's liquid aminos. Their serving sizes, even though it's 100 milligrams per serving, which is technically considered low sodium, their serving is 1/8 of a teaspoon. So instead of using the standard 1 tablespoon, which most manufacturers use for soy sauce, they've just used a much smaller amount to lower the sodium artificially. So I measure out the sodium or I measure out soy sauce, but for every other product, I'm going to look specifically here, this beef, I'm not buying beef, but it doesn't have much salt in it. This down here, sodium 260, it is under 300, but I'm probably going to try and find something a little bit lower. I will say this, no added salt will be the lowest, around 10 to 50 milligrams per serving. So no added salt is literally what it means. There's no added salt. There's only naturally occurring salt. And then low sodium is 140 milligrams per serving or less. So low sodium, 140 milligrams per serving or less. Again, keeping in mind how many servings we're consuming of that product. So next we have the pastas and we have some beans and protein. So looking at labels for grains, now we're looking at the actual ingredient label. So one of the things I'm looking for is the word whole. I want it to say WHOLE. So here on the left-hand side, we have some pasta. You'll see that it does not say whole wheat anywhere. It does say niacin, iron, thiamine, riboflavin, and folic acid. So by law, if a manufacturer uses white flour as a primary ingredient in a product, it has to enrich it with niacin, riboflavin, folic acid, thiamine, and iron. Here, for your whole grain product, if the primary grain is whole grain, manufacturers don't have to enrich the product with those vitamins, or with those minerals, rather. So here you'll see whole grain. Cool, it says whole. It's a whole grain product, and it doesn't list out thiamine, riboflavin, folic acid, iron. So we're good. This product on the right is not a refined grain. You'll look on the nutrient facts label. I check the sodium. The sodium is 0. Cool, this product gets my stamp of approval. It only has 1 ingredient. It's not an enriched whole grain, and the sodium is low. So those are the 2 very main things that I look at on the label. You'll also notice that the fiber to carbohydrate ratio is right around a 1:6, right around 1:6. So not too far off that 1:5, even though it's not a product with a product that has multiple ingredients in it. It will say in the nutrient facts label, thiamine, riboflavin, folic acid, iron. Don't be confused with naturally occurring minerals with ones that were added in the ingredients. Ken, do you have another question?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I forgot to.
Oh, okay. So this is beans. So here, there's nothing on the front that says anything about sodium. and we checked the sodium and it has 480 milligrams. That is way too much. So this product I'm not getting. You could rinse them out, but I'm not making a habit of buying this product. And because I know the ingredients are going to be black beans, water, and salt, I check, okay, there's 3 ingredients. I'm okay with water and black beans, but the sodium's too high. But if the sodium was 80 milligrams and the ingredients are black beans, water, and salt, I'm okay with the black beans and the water, and the sodium checks out. So I'm okay with this product in terms of label reading. I won't get into affordability. I do want to wrap up with a few more things, but all of this presentation is pre-recorded on my website, and that's available to you as well. And last but not least, here's just another example of something that actually caught me off guard. So this product here on the left, it says certified 100% organic hard red spring wheat. So for me, I want that to say whole, WHOLE. So on the product on the right, it says organic whole grain, soft wheat flour. So don't be confused. Wheat flour and white flour are the same thing. Whole wheat flour and wheat flour are different. So when it says whole, it means that all 3 parts of the grain are included: the germ, the bran, and the endosperm. So if you remember wheat germ or wheat bran that you can buy at the grocery store, wheat bran is the fibrous outer coating. The wheat germ is the fatty inside where the vitamins and minerals are stored. That's that part that can oxidize. So in the process of refining products, manufacturers have increased their shelf life. And then the endosperm, that's the starchy part that's left over. That's the carbohydrate. I'm not going to talk about meat. Frozen vegetables, again, single ingredients: broccoli, cauliflower, corn, beans, peas, that kind of thing. And then before you check out, is half the food that you bought, assuming that you're buying for the whole kitchen, is half your food produce? Is a quarter of it protein? Is a quarter of it carbohydrates? Because most of the food in my house is non-perishable in the form of beans and grains and my proteins and such, I'm really only going to the grocery store to get produce. 2 to 3 times a week, I go to the grocery store to get produce. Most of the other things are going to be able to be stored at room temperature in my pantry. I'm going to skip over just some meal examples. This is all available on my website. I'm going to show you that right now. Here we are. So this is my website, SeanTheRD.com. That's me. RD stands for registered dietitian. And what you do is you go under Learn Presentations.
John,
Yes, sir.
I don't quite see the website title. I see pizza on whole wheat dough, low sodium tomato, lots of veggies.
Okay. Let me.
I see the foods.
I see what happened. No, don't want
You can
that.
probably X out of the PowerPoint and then share again and go back to the website.
Got it. I got it right here. How's that?
That works.
Yeah. So SeanTheRD.com, SeanTheRD.com.
Right up here. Yep.
Yeah. Under Learn, you go to Presentations and it'll take you to this page. You'll recognize this guy here. That's me without a mustache. In this presentation, I talk about the heart healthy eating. So what does it look like to eat healthy? What should our diet look like? And you'll recognize some of that information tonight. that we talked about tonight. This one's on diabetes, so type 1 and type 2 diabetes. This is great if you want to learn about what to eat, carbohydrates, you want to learn about what causes diabetes. Oftentimes people talk about diabetes, but we don't actually educate people on why people get diabetes. And so this video really goes over what happens inside our body with type 2 diabetes. And I believe when we know why we have diabetes and what's happening, the food recommendations make a little bit more sense. This is a 15-minute long video on carbohydrates. So it's going to talk about label reading, carbs. It's going to talk about how our carbs affect our blood sugars. It's going to talk about the different parts of the grain. So it's going to go over that information as well. This is on protein. So as I mentioned before, don't eat deli meat. It increases our risk for colon cancer. Red meat is considered a probable human carcinogen by the World Health Organization. We know that plant sources of protein are going to be higher in fiber. They're going to be less inflammatory. This presentation goes over that. And then this one's on fat. So butter, lard, bacon grease, fried food, oils, avocados, nuts, and seeds. Should we be eating any of these things? What servings? What should I look for? So it goes over that information. And then last but not least, the presentation tonight was adapted from this Heart Healthy Shopping and Cooking. So if you want to see more of those meal examples or go over the label reading again, this is pre-recorded here for your entertainment. I do want to point out, we talked about the book club, and I believe it was the Blue Zone book that y'all are going to be reading.
Mhm.
So I did a presentation on the Blue Zones here. So you can learn more information about the Blue Zones, what they eat, what's good about their diet, why do they live so long, why are they so healthy. So this is a great presentation that I did on that. So if you're interested, it will supplement that information. This one's on sodium. So again, if you want to learn more about low sodium label reading, here I go through my kitchen. I show you products from my own house and go over what the sodium I look for. And if you wanted to go over the fat information, so calories from fat versus weight from fat and all that, if that was a bit confusing, this goes over that information again. And then real quick, recipes and resources. Here is the Blue Zones website, which I recommend. Here's a link for their recipes. And the cool thing about their recipes page is it has an ingredient search box. So if you want to look for quinoa recipes, you just type in quinoa, it'll take you right there. And this button will take you right to their main site. So I did just want to springboard off that. It's definitely something that I recommend. And here's a little bit more information in case you're interested. That's it. Thank you guys so much for allowing me to share this information with you. And I hope that you found it helpful.
Wow, that was great. Loved it.
That's great. Great. Thank you, Sean. And yeah, lots of time for questions. If anyone has questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Trouty. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, Trouty.
How much is the minimum that body needs in order to survive?
That's a great question. So it kind of depends
Per day.
on your activity level, but generally speaking, at least 1,200 calories. If you're under 1,200 calories, that's generally considered starvation.
No,
And
no,
I
no.
would
Salt only.
Oh, okay. So for sodium on the lower end, we recommend 1,500 milligrams on the upper end, around 2,000 milligrams. The American Heart Association recommends no more than 2,300 milligrams.
What's the lowest one we need to take in order to balance?
I don't have the exact number, but I want to say maybe 800. It could be a little bit lower than that. We don't, again, it depends on how much we sweat. And if we have any other conditions, kidney conditions that cause us to lose too much sodium. But I wouldn't recommend anything less than 1,000, especially if you get any kind of cramping or anything like that. But 1,500 is generally the lower end of what we recommend.
Oh, okay. I don't get hardly any of it on there. I do cramp a lot.
But it is it naturally occurs in all food. There's natural sodium is a mineral, so it's impossible to have a no sodium diet. Like Dr. Greger has some videos on nutritionfacts.org about tribes in Africa and stuff that are on super low sodium diets and stuff. So it's nothing you have to really worry about getting too little.
Don't you need isn't salt like the major electrolyte?
Yeah.
You need electrolytes in order for your nervous system to work. So eating too little sodium.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if you're
it's related to people that drink like for competition 3 gallons of water and they die. It's because they've diluted their salt too much and their nervous system shuts down.
Yeah, periodically I take Gatorade, then I'm fine, or else a little salt in water, and then I'm up to it again. No problem. Once in a while, I'm too low.
All right, next question, Judy.
Hi. I had a question earlier. I didn't realize we were supposed to raise our hands, so I put it in the chat. But what I was asking was, earlier you were talking about buying things in bulk, and you mentioned a single ingredient and a single distributor, I think it was. I was wondering what a single distributor is.
Okay, yeah, you were talking about what was written on the slide. And so what I mean by that is, if we take Oreos, for example, there's a lot of different ingredients in Oreos. There's wheat, there's vegetable oil, there's sugar. And so in order for an Oreo to be made, there's going to be a lot of people and distributors, individuals involved in the making of processed food. So it's going to go from one factory, let's say sugar, to another factory, which is going to be the Oreos, and then it's going to be distributed again to the grocery store. So ideally, our food is going from farm to table, from farm to the grocery store, or yeah, but it's not going from here to here to here to here and then to the store.
Okay, thank you. That was a big help.
Yeah, thank you for asking that.
So, Sean, I'm just kind of curious whether there's a lot of people understand about sodium restriction, and iodine has been added to a lot of salt to prevent hypothyroidism. And so do you find many people who are not getting enough iodine in their diet? And, I know for myself, I eat sea vegetables and, don't add much, but a lot of people are resistant to eating sea vegetables like dulse and wakame and whatever. What's your take on that when you're talking with people who have hypothyroidism? Do you do research on their diet to see if they're getting enough iodine when they're in the hospital, or does that seem to escape a lot of the time? Just your thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. One of the concerns that major organizations had when we started going towards like sea salt and more products containing salt but not iodized salt was, is the general public going to become iodine deficient? As you had mentioned, sea vegetables are great sources of iodine. We make vegan sushi often here at the house. It's really easy and fun to do. You can get like Dulse flakes. You can get like little flakes, and I take just a little pinch. It's kind of like, I don't know if you have like fish food, you feed the fish. I do that. I say, hey, honey, put your hand out. She hates it because it's salty. Put your hand out, and I put a little bit in there, and you just, you lick it out of the palm of your hand, and it gives you quite a bit of iodine. And as you know, a lot of the patients that come to the hospital, even if they have hypothyroidism, it's generally not the major concern of something that they're actively investigating. I will share this, which you might find interesting, and that is for people with like thyroid cancers, that if they're doing certain kinds of like radioactive scanning, radioactive iodine, they have to be on a very low iodine diet so that their thyroid will uptake the radioactive iodine. And I found it extremely difficult to follow a low iodine diet. Basically, anything that grows in the ground is absorbing some amount of iodine. So in order to get these patients at a level that's acceptable is very, very challenging. So it's not something that we necessarily address as a primary issue.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Any questions? Any thoughts?
Charlie, first of all, Sean, that was a great talk. That was really wonderful. I learned so much. And I love and hope that this will get people to just make a label reading a habit, like it's something that becomes second nature. It's amazing what you find out that it's unexpected, that has been added to foods that you would have, you would think that there's no way there'd be added, fats or sugars or salts to certain foods because it just doesn't make any sense. And so even foods, just encourage people to check the labels of just about every food that they pick up. And the reason is those surprises. So for instance, if you want to get certain nut butters, and you can look for the nut butters that have no added sugar, and it'll say right there, no added salt, no added sugar. But if you flip around and you look at the label, they have palm oil added to the nut butter. And so, you've really got to watch out for those sneaky little additions to some of the foods that we like and we think might actually be healthy. But sure enough, they have some unhealthy ingredients added. Another example are plant-based milks, looking for the added sugars in oat milk or soy milk. And same thing with dried fruits. It's crazy how the sugar that's added to dried fruits. And I made the mistake once of buying this big bag of dried mangoes from Costco because I thought, what a healthy snack. And I love mangoes. And I get home and I'm eating them. I'm like, gosh, these are really sweet mangoes. And I finally turn over the package and the first ingredient was mangoes, but the second ingredient was cane sugar. I just couldn't believe it. So anyway, I think this is just such a great start to get people just to get into this habit when they go grocery shopping. So thank you.
Yeah, if I can just say one quick thing. Thank you, Kristen. The no stir peanut butters. There's a reason why the fat doesn't separate. You'll see the oil on the top of the peanut butter. The reason they're no stir is because instead of using a unsaturated fat like peanut oil or just the natural fats separating, they mix in a saturated fat. What saturated fat are they going to mix in? Palm oil. And so the one thing that I do look for in peanut butter is that it doesn't have palm oil. And that's not just because it's a saturated fat, but I don't believe there's such thing as like sustainably harvest palm oil. Like they're taking Fiji and turning what is one of the world's oldest rainforests into basically a monocrop of palms, and it's destroying the habitats for orangutans. And so I don't need that in my peanut butter. So that's my soapbox. I don't get anything with palm oil, and that goes for plant-based butters. Some plant-based butters will have palm oil in them. You can find them if you do baking. You can find them without palm oil. So I don't get the palm oil. I've actually written them Earth Balance. Oh, Earth Balance has, look at, you got me started. Earth Balance has palm oil in it. I wrote them a letter and complaining about it, and they wrote back and said something about it being sustainable, but I told them basically I'm not going to buy their product anymore until it doesn't have palm oil in it.
That's good to know, because that's what I usually buy is Earth Balance. So I'm glad you shared that with me. Yeah.
Right next to it, I forget what it's called. It's like it's a black wrapper and it's a stick. It
Mykonos.
says plant on it.
It's not Mykonos.
Plant on it. Anyway, no palm oil.
Ken, I'm going to let you ask one more question, but first I want to ask one more question of Sean. The question has to do, since you're working in the hospital, and someday some of us may wind up in a hospital with an MI, cardiovascular disease, stroke. What should we do to get a diet that is actually healthy for us? Because I don't think that most hospitals are actually promoting healthy meals. And so what's the strategy to actually get healthy food in a hospital?
In the hospital.
Great question. Three things. First off, ask for an additional menu. Some hospitals will have additional menus in addition to the primary menu that you get. So assuming that you're on a regular diet or a liberalized diet, and some hospitals will be more liberal than others, ask for an additional menu. Number two, ask to speak to the dietitian. Just say, hey, I want to go over some food options. Just tell them you have a restrictive diet. The dietitian will come and see you within 24 hours. We come, same day, sometimes within a few hours or within 10 minutes. So if you're at Mackenzie-Willamette, just ask to speak to the dietitian. They'll go over your diet, your allergies, your food preferences, what the kitchen can offer you, any additional selections. They can make changes to your diet. They can go over everything. We talk to the chefs. We have a ton of vegan, plant-based, whole grain, tofu, custom-made food options every single day in our kitchen that are not listed on the menu. So talk to one of the dietitians to see what they can offer you, if they have food from the cafe, if they have extra stuff that the chefs can whip up for you. And then last but not least, if allowed, you can talk with your nurse or your dietitian. Ask if family's allowed to bring in food. So assuming you don't have an upcoming surgery or anything where you need to be made NPO, where they hold your diet, ask to have family bring stuff in. So if you have a supportive family or they live locally, have them just bring in some food. Don't have them bring in a whole bunch of perishable stuff, because we don't necessarily have the fridge to keep days worth of food, but non-perishable foods, snacks, nuts and seeds. And if they are making multiple trips or one trip a day, they can at least bring in food for like 1 or 2 meals.
Thank you. Ken.
Well, Sean, you mentioned it briefly, the machines. I didn't even know about the machines before I started doing this lifestyle. So I don't eat a lot of peanut butter or nut butters, but when I do, it came from a machine. And almost most of the stores have them. Fred Meyer's has them. Market of Choice has it, and theirs might be organic peanuts. I can't remember. And then even Winco has the machine. So I make my own peanut butter. I love watching it come out of that machine, and there's nothing added to it. It's just peanuts, and you see it happening. It's just fun.
Yeah, it's great stuff. I tear my container ahead of time, fill it up, bring it to the counter, and then let them know what the tear weight is, and they can subtract it. My only concern, and I need to do some research on this, do they regularly clean the machines? And I hate to say it, but as someone that is very particular on like cleanliness, like, do they do regular maintenance on those machines? Sorry if I've ruined it for anyone. I'm still gonna use the machines.
No,
But next time I'm there, I'm gonna ask them, because I have it at Sundance as well. I'm gonna ask them, what's your regular maintenance schedule on cleaning this machine? Same thing with bulk bin items like brown sugar. Are they cleaning that brown sugar bin out, or are they just like, well, I do baking, sorry guys. Do they just load in more brown sugar? You know, oatmeal bins.
Sean, this was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so very much. We're very
Great
grateful
job.
for it. And
And I'm sure the class attendees like to hear voices other than Charlie and I every week.
Well,
So it's
I
great to
gotta
have you.
say, I've been doing this for 2 years, and yeah, a guest speaker is kind of nice.
yeah. We're going to have to work on some more of this, especially as we branch out into the community. So thank you again. And next week, Scott, what's on the agenda?
It's an open forum.
So you can bring your questions, and hopefully you'll get some answers. One last, Trouty, you want to make a statement? You got on mute first.
Thank you so very much. I learned an awful lot. It was worthwhile.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, you're all very welcome. I really appreciate your time. This is, why we get into the field, is to help people just like you.
That was
Thanks.
great. Okay, everybody, until next time. See you next
All right,
week.
good night.
Yeah.
Thank you.